we're actually starting on part 2. This is chapter 9 from Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. So to kind of catch us up on what we've been doing, we've really heard a lot about Trevor's backstory, and he is actually about to meet his dad. So that's hopefully kind of getting you back into where we're at in the book. When Dutch colonists landed at the southern tip of Africa over 300 years ago, they encountered an indigenous people known as the Khoisan. The Khoisan are the Native Americans of South Africa, a lost tribe of Bushmen, nomadic hunter-gatherers, distinct from the darker Bantu-speaking people who later migrated south to become the Zulu, Xhosa, and Sotho tribes of modern South America. While settling in Cape Town and the surrounding frontier, the white colonists had their way with the Khoisan women, and the first mixed people of South Africa were born. To work the colonists' farms, slaves were soon imported from different corners of the Dutch Empire, from West Africa, Madagascar, and the East Indies. The slaves and the Khoisan intermarried, and the white colonists continued to dip and take their liberties. And over the time, the Khoisan all but disappeared from South Africa. While most were killed off through disease, famine, and war, the rest of their bloodline was bred out of existence, mixed in the descendants of whites and slaves to form an entirely new race of people, coloreds. Colored people are the hybrid, complex mix. Some are light and some are dark. Some have Asian features, some have white features, some have black features. It's not uncommon for colored men and colored women to have a child that looks nothing like either parent. The curse that colored people carry is having no clearly defined heritage to go back to. If they trace their lineage back far enough, at a certain point it splits into white and native, and a tangled web of other. Since their native mothers are gone, their strongest affinity has always been their white fathers, the Afrikaners. Most colored people don't speak African languages. They speak Afrikaans. Their religion, their institutions, and all of the things that shaped their culture came from the Afrikaners. The history of colored people in South Africa is, in this respect, worse than the history of black people in South Africa. For all that black people have suffered, they know who they are. Colored people don't. Chapter 9, the Mulberry Tree. At the end of the street in Eden Park, right in a bend at the top of the road, stood a giant mulberry tree, growing out of someone's front yard. Every year, when it bore fruit, the neighborhood kids would go and pick berries from it, eating as many as they could find, filling up bags to take home. They would play under the tree together. I had to play under the tree by myself. I didn't have any friends in Eden Park. I was the anomaly wherever we lived. In Hillbrow, we lived in a white area and nobody looked like me. In Soweto, we lived in a black area and nobody looked like me. Eden Park was a colored area. In Eden Park, everyone looked like me, but we couldn't have been more different. It was the biggest mind bender I've ever experienced. The animosity I felt from the colored people I encountered growing up was one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with. It taught me that it was easier to be an insider as an outsider than an outsider as an insider. If a white guy chooses to immerse himself in hip-hop culture and only hang out with black people say, "Cool, white guy, do you know what to do? Do what you need to do." If a black guy chooses to button up his blackness to live in a white people and plays lots of golf, white people say, "Fine, I like Brian, he's safe." But try being a black person who immersed himself in white culture while still living in a black community. Try being a white person who adopts the trappings of black culture while still living in the white community. You will face hate and ridicule and ostracism than you can ever imagine or begin to fathom. People are willing to accept if you see you as an outsider trying to assimilate into their world. But then when they see you as a fellow tribe member attempting to disavow their tribe, that is something they will never forgive. That has happened to me in Eden Park. I was mixed, but not colored. Colored by complexion, but not by culture. Because of that, I was seen as a colored person who didn't want to be colored. In Eden Park, I encountered two types of people. Some people Some colored people hated me because of my blackness. My hair was curly, and I was proud of my afro. I spoke African languages and loved speaking them. People would hear me speaking Xhosa or Zulu, and they'd say, "What is this, Bozeman? What are you, a Bushman? Why are you trying to be black? Why do you speak the click-click language? Look at your light skin. You're almost white, and you're throwing it away." Other colored people hated me because of my whiteness. Even though I identified as being black, I had a white father. I went to an English private school. I learned to get along with white people at church. I could speak perfect English, and I barely spoke Afrikaans, the language colored people were supposed to speak. So colored people thought I was better than them. Even when I thought I was light, I wasn't. One year I got a brand new bike during the summer holidays. My cousin, Lungsky, and I were taking turns riding around the block. I was riding up our street when a cute colored girl came out to the road and stopped me. She smiled and waved to me sweetly. "Hey," she said, "can I ride your bike?" I was completely shocked. Oh wow, I thought, I made a friend. "Yeah, of course," I said. I got off, and she got in, and rode about 20 or 30 feet. Some random older kid came running up the street. She stopped and got off, and he climbed on and rode away. I was happy that the girl had spoken to me, and ran back home smiling and skipping. My cousin asked where the bike was. I told him. "Trevor, you've been robbed," he said. "Why didn't you chase them?" "I thought they were being nice. I thought I'd made friends." Muncie was older, my protector. He ran off and found the kids, and 30 minutes later he came back with my bike. Things like that happened a lot. I was bullied all the time. The incident at the Mulberry Tree was probably the worst of them. Late one afternoon, I was playing by myself, like I always did, running around the neighborhood. This group of 5 or 6 colored boys was up the street picking berries off the mulberry tree and eating them. I went over and started picking some to take home for myself. The boys were a few years older than me, around 12 or 13. They didn't talk to me, and I didn't talk to them. They were speaking to one another in Afrikaans, and I could understand what they were saying. Then one of them, this kid, who was the ringleader of the group, walked over. "Can I see your mulberries?" My first thought again was, "Oh cool, I made a friend." I held out my hand and showed my mulberries. Then he knocked them out of my hand and smushed them into the ground. The other kids started laughing. I stood there and looked at him at a moment. By this point, I had developed a thick skin. I was used to being bullied. I shrugged it off and went back to picking berries. Clearly not getting the reaction he wanted, this kid started cursing me out. I ignored him and went about my business. Then I finally spat on the back. Then I felt a splat on the back of my head. He'd hit me with a mulberry. It wasn't painful, just startling. I turned to face him, and splat, he hit me again right in the face. Then a split second before I could even react, all of the kids were starting pelting with berries. Some of the berries weren't ripe, and they stung like rocks. I tried to cover my face with my hands, but there were a barrage coming from all sides. The kids were laughing and pelting me and calling me names. Bushy, Bushman. I was terrified. All of a sudden of it, I didn't know what to do. I started crying and I ran. I ran for my life, all the way back down the road to our house. When I ran inside, my mother looked at me horrified. What happened? Between sobs, I told her the story. When I finished, she burst out laughing. It's not funny, I said. No, Trevor, she said. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing out of relief. I thought you'd been beaten up. I thought you were covered in blood. I'm laughing because it's only berry juice. Look on the bright side, she pointed out the half of me covered in dark berry juice. Now you really are half black and half white. It's not funny. Trevor, you're okay, she said. Go and wash up. You're not hurt. You're hurt emotionally, but you're not hurt. Half an hour later, Abel showed up. At that point, Abel was still my mom's boyfriend. He wasn't trying to be my father or even stepfather. He was more like a big brother than anything else. I didn't know him that well, but one thing I did know was that he had a temper. Very charming when he wanted to be, incredibly funny, but he could be mean. He'd grown up in the homelands, where you had to fight to survive. Abel's big too, around 6 feet, 3, long and lean. I knew he was dangerous. I'd seen it. Someone cut him off in traffic and Abel would yell out the window. The other guy would honk and yell back. In a flash, Abel would be out of the car, over to theirs, grabbing the guy through the driver's window, screaming in his face, raising a fist. You see the other guy panic. When Abel walked in that night, he sat on the couch and saw that I'd been crying. What happened? He said. I started explaining, my mother cut me off. Don't tell him, she said. She knew what would happen. She knew better than me. Don't tell me what, Abel said. It's nothing, she said. It's not nothing, I said. She glared at me. Don't tell him. Abel was frustrated. What? Don't tell me what? He'd been drinking. He never came home from work sober. And the drinking always made his tempers worse. It was strange, but in that moment I realized that if I said the right things, I could get him to step in and do something. We're almost family, and I knew if I made him feel like his family had been insulted, he'd get me back at the boys. Help me get back at the boys. I told him the story, the names they called me, and how they attacked me. My mother kept laughing it off, telling me to get over it, and the kids being kids, no big deal. She was trying to diffuse the situation, but I couldn't see that. I was just mad at her. Abel wasn't laughing. As I told him what the bullies had done, I saw his anger building up inside him. With Abel's anger, there was no ranting or raving, no clenched fists. He sat there on the couch listening to me, not saying a word. Then very calm and deliberately he stood up. Take me to the boys, he said. Yes, I thought, this is it. Big Brother is going to get revenge for me. We got in his car and drove up the road, stopping a few houses down from the tree. It was dark now except for the light from the street lamps. But we could see the boys were still there, playing under the tree. I pointed to the ringleader. That one, he's the main one. Abel slammed his foot on the gas and shot up onto the grass straight towards the bottom of the tree. He jumped out. I jumped out. As soon as the kids saw me, they knew exactly what was happening. They scattered and ran like crazy. Abel was quick. He was fast. The ringleader had made a dash for it and was trying to climb up over the wall. Abel grabbed him, pulled him down, and dragged him back. Then he stripped a branch off the tree, a switch, and started whipping him. I loved it. Revenge truly is sweet. Then I caught a glimpse of the look of terror in the boy's face. I realized that Abel had gone past getting revenge for me. He was going to teach this kid a lesson. He was just beating him. He was a grown man venting his rage on a 12-year-old boy. In an instant, I went from, yes, I got my revenge, to, dear God, what have I done? Once the kid went limp, Abel dragged him over the car and held him up in front of me and said, say you're sorry. The kid was whimpering and trembling. He looked at me in the eye, and I had never seen fear in someone's eye like this. He had been beaten by a stranger in a way I don't know I've ever been beaten before. He said he was sorry, but it was like his apology wasn't for what he had done to me. It was sorry for every bad thing he had ever done in his life, because he didn't know what he didn't know there could be a punishment like this. Looking in the boy's eyes, I realized how much he had and I had in common. He was a kid, I was a kid. He was crying, I was crying. He was a colored boy in South Africa, taught him to hate and how to hate himself, who had bullied him that he needed to bully me. He'd made me feel fear, and to get my revenge, I unleashed my fury on his world. I'd done a terrible thing. Once the kid apologized, Abel shoved him away and kicked him. The kid ran off, and he drove back to the house in silence. At home, Abel and my mom got into a huge fight. She was always on him about his temper. You can't go around hitting other people's children. You're not the law. The anger is, this is no way to live. A couple hours later, the kids' dad drove over to our house to confront Abel. Abel was out by the gate, and I watched him from inside the house. At that point, Abel was truly drunk. This kid's dad had no idea what he was walking into. He was a mild-mannered, middle-aged guy. I don't remember much about him, because I was watching Abel the whole time. I never took my eyes off him. I knew that was where the danger was. Abel didn't have a gun yet. He bought one. He bought that later. Abel didn't need a gun to put the fear of God in you. I watched as he got right in the guy's face. I couldn't hear the other man was saying but I heard Abel, don't mess with me. I'll kill you. The guy turned quickly and got back in the car and drove away. He thought he was coming to defend the honor of his family. He left happy to escape with his life. Alright guys, that is chapter 9. We'll see you next week for more.